So alcohol.
Yes.
Alcohol's been on a journey.
Yes.
It's been on a journey in terms of society's opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take me on that journey and tell me where we are now? And
Yeah.
and when I'm saying that, I'm talking about society's opinion on its health benefits and what it
Mm-hmm.
is, and then also what we're getting wrong now about alcohol.
Yeah. The journey of alcohol is fascinating. So first, I think we think of this as a relatively modern thing, but, archaeologists have discovered like beer making equipment in hunter-gatherers' cave dwellings from 13,000 years ago. That's wild.
Wow.
Like 13,000 years of people figuring out how to make beer. You look at China 9,000 years ago, it was really about like a spiritual journey or a social thing. It was never really about health. At some point, we started talking about this as something that is good for your health, like drink red wine, it's going to improve your health. And that's where I think we got wrong. And the reason why was actually from how we were looking at the data. So first, if you look at only one health condition, there are some health conditions where a moderate amount of alcohol actually improves your health. But it was also how people were conducting the studies. So in most of those studies, what people do is they take like a massive population, tens of thousands of people, where we have some data where they're reporting how much alcohol they used. And then we look at health risks over time. And scientists would lump people into sort of non-drinkers versus light drinkers, moderate drinkers, or heavy drinkers. And what they were finding is that people who were drinking even up to the moderate level were actually doing better than the people who weren't drinking at all. And so that was where that concept that drinking is good for your health came from. And so people talk about this like J-shaped curve, meaning that moderate drinkers actually have lower risks of health problems. And then it's really only when you start drinking very high levels that you start having more risk of health problems than people who don't drink at all. What they realized was wrong with that is that in the people who don't drink at all, many of those people are not drinking because they're actually really unhealthy for another reason. Like they might have heart failure and they like don't want to drink because they don't want it to mix with their medication. Or they might have had a history of alcohol use disorder and they're actually in recovery. So they've already had some damage from alcohol and they are not drinking because of that. And so when you change the reference group, you actually make the sort of group that you compare people to people who very rarely drink. So it's not that they're not drinkers at all, but they drink very, very light levels, then you start to see that those like health benefits of alcohol go away, especially if you look across all conditions.
Are you telling me that there's no healthy level of alcohol consumption?
Yes, I would never say drinking alcohol is good for your health. That doesn't mean that drinking at what we call low risk levels can't be a part of a healthy lifestyle. So it's a slight shift that like, don't fool yourself into thinking that drinking that glass of wine is like going to exercise for 30 minutes. Like it's not something that's going to promote your health. I think of it more like having dessert, eating bacon, going out in the sun. There are risks associated with all those activities. It doesn't mean that I would say you can never do any of that, but you need to understand what the risks are and then make choices for yourself.
So look at this glass of wine here and this pint of beer.
Yep.
If I drank one of these a day, not a huge amount, I think what people tend to think is they think, well, it's only one, so my body will just flush it out and there'll be no adverse health consequences.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, so part of the challenge is what we think of as one drink. So I think much like, if you learn to read the serving size on a food, you realize that like, a serving of ice cream is like a half a scoop. It's not like a giant ice cream sundae. The same is true with alcohol. So in the UK, the kind of low risk drinking limits talk about units of alcohol, which is the equivalent of 8 grams of alcohol. So how much of a drink has 8 grams of alcohol? And to be in that low risk category, you have to be below 14 units. The problem is that glass of wine, just eyeballing it, has several units of alcohol. So it is not even though we think of it as a single drink, it's probably, I have to guess, but it's probably like 3 units of alcohol.
So if I have a glass of wine every day, I'll be over that limit then? You'd
be right at that limit. The problem is most people don't drink just one glass. If you, if you have 2 glasses one day and then 1 glass one day and then 3 glasses one day because you're at a social function, all of a sudden you're actually quite a lot over that limit.
So if you said that this is roughly 3 units, roughly.
And you get 14 a week.
You get 14 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 times 7, 21.
Yep. So yes, you're over if you're drinking that size. Yeah.
Okay, so if I have this glass of wine every day, then I'd be over the UK limit of?
Lower risk drinking.
Lower risk drinking. So I'd be medium risk drinking.
You'd be in what we call moderate risk, which is associated with pretty much every form of cancer, which I think people don't know.
Okay. Because I was wondering why cancer has been increasing.
Yes.
A variety of different forms of cancer have been increasing. Breast cancer is one of the ones we always hear about that's increasing. So you're saying, what is the data in terms of low or moderate risk of drinking and cancer?
Yeah. So the data is growing and really worrisome. So for breast cancer, there's a few cancers that even at low risk limits, you see the risk begin to increase. So where we would say there's kind of no healthy, or there's no even like low risk amount. So breast and esophageal cancer are two examples of that. So breast cancer, if you were to drink below those low risk limits, so in the US, that would be fewer than 7 drinks, but a drink in the US is 5 ounces of wine, which is smaller than that. Or in the UK is below that 14 units. So it would be, fewer than 7 of that size glass of wine. We still see a slight increase in the risk of breast cancer. It's about a 5% increase. So that means your risk of breast cancer would increase by about 5%. Now that's not huge. So I think, percent increase is kind of hard to do the math on. But if you think in the US, for example, the average woman has a 13% likelihood of getting breast cancer in their lifespan.
13% likelihood?
Really,
Wow.
really high. So 5% increase would increase that to like 13.6 or so.
So that means that if there's 9 women in this room, one of them is going to get breast cancer probabilistically
in their life. Yep.
Damn.
Yeah.
Why is it and it's increasing?
Yeah, and so the reasons for that are likely environmental because your genes don't change over that time period. So the risk factors, if you think about breast cancer, it's alcohol, it's obesity, it's, age when you have children or don't have children because it's a really hormonally driven cancer. Same thing if you think about colon cancer. That's a really scary one where we're seeing more and more cases in younger people. Some of the drivers of that, eating meat. So processed meats increase your risk of colon cancer. So, these very sort of normal behaviors. There's probably other environmental things, honestly, that we're not yet measuring or able to measure, just given the rate of acceleration. When I talk to my colleagues who are oncologists, things like plastics or other things that we don't yet know, it's clearly something in the environment that is driving these increased cancer risks.
So even at this sort of level, if I'm drinking, that might be 1 unit, right?
Yes. So that would be 1 unit. So that would be fewer than 14 of that. So you could see if you had double that, it would be a decent pour of wine. You could not have more than 7 of those in a week to be in low risk. But even drinking that amount, your risk of breast cancer would go up a little bit.
Even this amount?
Mm-hmm. There's really sort of no safe amount of alcohol when it comes to breast cancer.
Is it just breast cancer?
So that low risk category. So when these big cancer studies categorize people as sort of low risk or light drinkers, moderate or heavy. And for pretty much every cancer, once you get to the moderate category, we start seeing increases. And there's what we call a dose-response relationship. So the more you drink, the higher your risk of cancer. There's only a few cancers that the risk seems to increase even at that very low level. And breast cancer is one of those. And then esophageal cancer is one of those. So there are certain cancers where even a small amount of alcohol will increase your risk.
Does it have an impact on thinking about cancers that are prominent in men?
Yeah. So colon cancer, we're seeing that in a lot of young men. Liver cancer, prostate cancer, which is obviously a male cancer, we don't think of as much as being sort of an alcohol-sensitive cancer, but most cancers, because the way alcohol impacts your risk of cancer is not really on a specific organ outside of the liver. It's really about how it changes our DNA. So it's about inflammation and what are called reactive oxygen species that sort of change our cells and increase the risk over time of the mutations that lead to cancer.
So can you drill down on that? So if I'm a heavy drinker, so say that I'm drinking, let's say I'm drinking 2 glasses of wine a day consistently, which I guess would, if I was drinking
if you're drinking 2 of those
a day,
glasses, you'd be in the heavy category.
So 2 of those a day puts me in the heavy drinker category.
Yeah. Which would surprise most people, right? Like that, for many people, is very normal.
It is very normal, yeah. I think it's somewhat more difficult for younger people to understand because younger people drink less. But if I think about the generation above me, having 2 glasses of wine a day is quite normal. After work, on the weekends, with every meal that you have. So that would make me a heavy drinker. And then what are the stats saying in terms of my cancer risk profile?
Yeah, so it varies by cancer, but roughly we're talking like a 40% increase in cancer depending on the cancer type. And the more you drink, the more that's going to go up. So, these are scientific studies where it's not precise to you as an individual. They're based on large populations, but definitely the more you drink, the greater the risk. And
then if I have other sort of, do they call them comorbidities?
Yeah, exactly.
So other illnesses, other diseases in my body, my probability is going to go up further if I'm obese, if I'm overweight.
Exactly. If you smoke. So one of the main drivers of alcohol too in cancer is that it actually makes you more susceptible to the cancer-causing effects of tobacco. So if you drink and smoke, your risk of cancer is going to be even higher.
How does that work?
The thought is like if you take esophageal cancer at like the cellular level, it makes you more susceptible to the carcinogens, which are kind of the cancer-causing compounds in tobacco. And so rather than just seeing like an additive risk, you actually almost get a multiplied risk in terms of the risk of cancer. So smoking and then obesity is the other big one. So a lot of cancers, your risk goes up if you're have an increase in your body mass.
What's going on in the body then? If I drink alcohol, how is that leading to cancer? You referenced it slightly there, but I want to make sure I'm super clear in my brain as to like what the knock-on effects are and how that ends up as cancer.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different mechanisms. So, I mean, maybe starting just with like, what does alcohol do in your body? So you ingest alcohol. The like fancy name for that is ethanol. It's a molecule, and it basically gets absorbed pretty quickly from your stomach. And so, it hits your bloodstream usually within 10 minutes or so of having a drink. How much it hits your bloodstream depends on how much water you have in your body. So alcohol doesn't penetrate into your fat. It just kind of diffuses into the water parts of your body. So that's actually why for many women, they will get more sort of drunk or more of an effect from alcohol at a lower level than men, because women have more body fat than men. Mm-hmm. But that's going to depend on you as an individual. If you have more body fat, you're going to have a different impact. So alcohol gets in your bloodstream. Alcohol can instantly cross across what we call your blood-brain barrier. So it impacts your brain instantly. And that's where you feel the initially pleasurable effects for many people of feeling a little relaxed, feeling more social, feeling a little bit, less anxiety. If you keep drinking and that level keeps going up, then you start having impaired judgment. You might have lack of motor coordination. So we've all seen this, and many people have probably experienced it. You may be stumbling, not able to drive safely. You're not going to make the same decisions you would make if you weren't drinking. And then if you keep drinking, then you can actually lose consciousness, so pass out, and people have experienced that. Your body is going to try to break down alcohol as quickly as it's able to. Like anything, we want to kind of excrete any abnormality and get back to our normal functioning. And so that process happens mostly in your liver, which is why the liver is so sensitive to alcohol.
Because your body sees ethanol as poison.
Yes. I mean, I know you talked about this, Dr. Lemke, but your body always wants to restore what's called homeostasis. Your body's always going to fight to get back to what it feels its normal is. And so ethanol is not something that belongs in your bloodstream. Your body's going to try to excrete it as fast as it can. And then it converts it into something called acetate, and then you can pee that out and breathe that out and get rid of it. So to eliminate the alcohol in your body, you have to go through this process. And part of that process includes this toxic molecule that's going to be floating around and causing damage to your cells. So that's one way that alcohol can cause cancer. The other is just general sort of inflammation. People have probably heard that inflammation is just not good for the body and increases the risk of cancer. And alcohol generates a lot of that inflammation in the process of getting eliminated. And so it can actually change your cells that over time that can lead to cancer.
So I also found this graph, which shows, for anyone that can't see what we're describing at the moment, it shows the acceleration in liver disease, death rates, and general liver disease compared to other parts of the body, other organs in the body, I believe it shows. What impact does alcohol have on the liver? And we have our little mannequin here of the human body. Where is the liver?
Yeah, great question. So here's our little mannequin. So just to orient people to the body, so we're looking at the inside of the body. So like the ribs are gone, the outside of the skin is gone. These two pink things are the